Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness, this is my first live stream, and I'm just looking on the screen to make sure everything is set up. As you come in, please feel free to say hi in the chat. I believe I have that set up. I'm really excited to be on YouTube and have more space. I'm so used to being on Instagram Lives when I do this, or having a Zoom and a masterclass registration, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to find a way that I could share with you and share with people who aren't inside of the mental wealth method all the things that I'm learning in a platform that is searchable, in a platform that can last for a long time. And YouTube just won. And I'm really excited that you're here, and I'm excited that we get to spend this time together. So this is part one of a celebration mini-series, because this week I am opening early enrollment for the Mental Wealth Method and launch a new sales page. And because I was so excited to do that, I wanted to gift you with something. I wanted to gift you with a free series of content, masterclass, live stream, whatever you want to call it, based on something that you requested. Yay, I'm so happy to see that you are joining and jumping in. Welcome, Shahira. Happy that you're here. And as a sign of my gratitude, I put up a poll to ask, would you rather learn about the art of holding space, or would you rather learn about the foundations of working with the subconscious mind to kick off this early enrollment? And people voted almost unanimously holding space. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And people wanted to know more than just, the broad way of holding space. People wanted to know how to hold space for yourself. How do I structure a session? How do I hold space for the person in front of me? So this is actually a 3-part series, and today is only part 1, and the next parts will come on the next 2 following Mondays. So we'll stretch it out, and then this will live here. So if you're catching the replay, awesome. You have 2 more parts to get to. And that way we're able to look at it through all of the angles, because there's a lot that goes into the equation of holding space. And today we're going to start with the one that people think is at the forefront, which is holding the space for the person in front of you. And I've decided to title this live stream "Holding Up a Mirror for the Person Across from You," because to me, that is the epitome of what holding space is. And from what I've learned as a life coach in my first few years doing this, even though I've been a space holder and I've been the friend, I've been the family member that people come to talk about things my entire life, doing it professionally, I've learned so much. So the things I'm going to share with you today are through my own personal experience of what I've learned, and breaking down some of the expectations that we put on ourselves as coaches, space holders, practitioners, so that we can kind of allow ourselves to just show up without having all that self-talk going on around, like, what do I say next? How am I gonna ride this wave? So today will be a mixture of some stories, some tips. And if you aren't a coach or a practitioner, but you're here and you are excited to think about this in the context of how you hold space in your life for people that you love, absolutely, you can totally map this across and make it relevant to the conversations that you have with loved ones or the conversations that you have with friends. So this is for everyone, and you can take or leave what resonates with you. If it's more of a personal chance for you to be here today, or if it's professional, then we will tailor to that specifically, but feel free to map across. Feel free to use the chat and say hi, ask questions as we go. I'm not used to this. I'm used to teaching on Zoom where I can go into screen share. So with this, I'm able to have an outline and just talk with you the whole time. So I hope that you like to listen, you like to sit back. I know that I love tuning into people's live streams. There's something so soothing and calming about just like being able to tune into someone talking about something that they love and that they're passionate about. Because it's so easy to like pretend that you're like at a lecture or something like that. And I know it's COVID, I know things are limited, but YouTube and Instagram and all these things where we can tune in and like be live with someone, it's like our virtual lectures, right? So I'm excited to share with you what I have learned, and this is kind of how it's going to go. So we'll go through the types of listening, because there are some different types of listening to keep in mind before we dive into holding up that mirror, right? And just to get clear on what kind of listening are you doing, right? We want to make sure that you are doing the type of listening that allows you to hold up that mirror. And when you think of that visual of holding up a mirror, you're holding up a mirror and the person in front of you is looking at themselves while they're talking to you. You're literally pushing everything right back to them. You're giving everything right back to them. You're reflecting everything right back to them. And as we look at that type of listening, just think about that for personal or professional relationships and how you show up in those spaces. And then we'll start to get into more of the unspoken language of holding space, which if my students are here, you know that that is more of the NLP stuff that I teach inside of Mental Wealth Method. So talking about the body language and the physicality of holding space and how you can build trust with someone through practicing your matching and mirroring, through building a mirror in other ways, not just holding it up and bouncing things back to them, but literally using your body to be a mirror. And then we'll get into the conversation about no one liking a backseat driver. And this is really powerful because this comes up the most in my integration calls with my students, and even in just one-on-one spaces and with conversations with other coaches. Like, we have to constantly teach ourselves to sit in the back seat, but not be a backseat driver, because no one likes to be driving a car and getting instructions about where to go. I don't know anyone who likes that, at least. So this section is going to be about asking powerful questions and about thinking through the ways that we're able to mirror back questions so that people can find their own solutions and have their own breakthroughs, which is going to be way more rewarding at the end of the day rather than us giving a statement. So if we're able to ask a question instead of declare a statement, that opens up a lot of doors when it comes to holding up a mirror for someone. And then I'm going to select a few questions that people have sent to me in emails and DMs and answer those specifically towards the end, and answer any questions that come up for you in the chat. We will see how long this goes. I have like about 45 minutes as a guess in my calendar, but we'll just flow with it, because sometimes when I'm live streaming like this and I'm not like tuned into slides, but I'm following an outline, I start to go into like a channeling mode, and things will come through or stories will come through, and I like to follow it. So if you can stay, awesome. If you have to go, know that this will be saved and you can catch the replay. But if something is channeling through, I assume and know and trust that someone out there that's listening, either live or on the replay, needed to hear that. So that's why the time is sort of flexible. But if you are here and you are maybe multitasking or just really settling in, I invite you to get cozy, and we will begin with the first section, which is the types of listening. And again, I want to invite you here to just think about, which one are you doing? So if you were to Google listening on Google and you were to find the different types of listening, as a coach, you hear a lot about active listening. Are you actively listening, right? And that's one type. But there are two other types. The first one being combative or competitive listening. This is the type of listening that means that you are waiting to interject. You're just waiting to get in there and listen just sort of enough so that you can say what you want to say. You might be directing the conversation, or you might be having an argument, but you're not actually listening. You look like you're listening, but you're pretending to make it seem like you're listening, but really you're formulating what you're going to say next. And this happens a lot in, heated conversations or arguments or miscommunications, but it can happen in other situations too. And sometimes it can even happen in coaching spaces. And since I know a lot of you tuning in are coaches, let's just give an example of this, right? Let's say you are with someone for a 3-month package and you are working on stuff together and you had a plan, right? And we're going to get to this in part 3 where we talk about structure versus flow in a coaching session. But you had a plan and you were really excited to be able to guide the session with this specific plan. Now, that can ease our anxiety when we are going into an hour and we don't know what to expect. Sometimes it's really nice to reference back on our notes and see okay, this is what we did last week. I have a gut feeling that this might happen this week. But nothing can really account for when you're just live with someone and you ask them hey, how are you doing? Something else might be going on in their life. Something totally different might come out of left field and you might have to throw that plan out the window. Now, throwing the plan out the window and being there for them and just being able to adjust to wherever they're at is the magic of holding space, right? But an example of combative or competitive listening could look like you trying to stick to that plan and trying to direct things as they're talking, be okay, so we were talking about this last week. Okay, and let's bring it back to last week. And you're trying to control it, right? So that could look like an example of combative or competitive listening in your coaching sessions. And if that's happening, that might quickly break a sense of rapport, which we'll get to in a little bit. But really, it's totally understandable where that's coming from, right? It's still coming from a place of you just wanting to show up as your best self and show up as your best coach and tour guide and a space holder and practitioner, and that's beautiful. But the thing is that I want to bust a myth here. I think there is this myth or this belief that when you enter into a coaching industry, I can't speak for therapy, right? It's a different sort of space that's being held there. But when you enter into life coaching, I think people think about it as okay, I have to give this person a solution. I have to create a space where we figure this out in the next hour. And that can feel like a ton of pressure. And I know that I've gone through that myself, where when I was first starting, I would jam pack my session so intensely. I would be back to back to back to back to back with techniques and questioning and all the things, because I wanted them to get the most out of their time. And I wanted them to get the most out of their problem, right? Or I wanted them to find 40 solutions to one problem, which was just an unrealistic expectation to myself. But I realized later on it was coming from a place of me feeling that's what I had to do. And it wasn't until I realized later, with a coach's help, that I wasn't giving them any space to figure things out on their own. And that was a hard blow to my ego, because I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. I thought I was holding that space for them to figure out their solutions and giving them lots of stuff. But I was forgetting something really important, and that can be less is more. And when we embody less is more, that looks like longer pauses, bigger spaces, silence. And that can be absolutely terrifying. So going back to the types of listening, the combative or the competitive type of listening where you're interjecting and you're trying to get in there, that's really coming from a place of being uncomfortable with the silence and being uncomfortable with longer pauses. But one reframe I want to give you is that if you have a session that has longer pauses, or you ask a question and you just zip it, that is so powerful, because what's happening in that silence is someone is going to find their own answer, and you do not need to go find it for them. So forgive yourself, release it. If you feel like, yep, I've totally done that before, it's only a chance to get better. Okay. So that's the first one. And like I said, can show up a lot in relationships, but I just gave the example of how it can show up in coaching. And then the second type of listening is passive yet attentive, where you're listening, but you're not really jumping in to say anything, but you're showing signs that you're listening and that you're understanding that it's landing. But you're not necessarily like getting in there and starting to give responses. And then the third, the one that we hear a lot, is active listening. And active listening is like the goal, right? We want to be able to show the person that's in front of us that we've been listening to them. And we want to mirror back pieces of what they've been saying so that we can show them that we've been listening and make them feel safe and build trust through mirroring their language. And also listen attentively, meaning we wait for them to finish. We don't have any agenda of interjecting. We wait for them to finish. And what can happen there is we actually get to hear someone's entire thought, which is so powerful, because really a lot of communication these days is of the combative or competitive nature, where people are just trying to get in there. Have you ever been catching up with a friend and they're like, it sounds like they prepared like a list of questions to ask you, and they're just like, how's your partner? How's your house? How's your job? How's your dog? Like, and they're just like going down the questions, and you're answering, but they're jumping to the next question before you even have a chance to finish responding. It feels like you're being cut off, and it feels like, wait, do they even want to hear like what I'm talking about? And that can be frustrating. Can be so frustrating. So when we're actively listening, we're waiting, whole body waiting, listening with our whole body, our whole being. We're waiting for them to finish. And on a subconscious level, because we talk about the subconscious a lot inside of the mental wealth method, is when we let someone finish, we allow them to like hit the void. And when I say hit the void, I mean when they can just talk and talk and talk and get to a place of really getting everything out there. And maybe, sometimes this happens naturally for people, but sometimes people don't just like unfold. But let's use the example if they are unfolding, and then all of a sudden they run into something like, oh my God, I can't believe where that came from, or oh my God, I can't believe I just landed on that, or where was that hiding? That's the magic of letting someone finish. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be silent the entire time, right? You can have short affirmative things that you're saying back to them, like, oh yeah, that sounds like a lot, or yes, making sounds, yes. But you know what I mean? Like short things, like definitely nodding, making eye contact, like embodying what they're feeling. If there's some excitement in the story, like feeling excited with them, right? Being a mirror, holding that mirror up for them. If they can look to you and see that you're there with them, that is such a validating experience. And in our culture, our society, that is more of the combative and competitive, tried to combine both of those words together, the combative nature, it feels really good to have someone actively listening to you. And it feels amazing to have someone be mirroring back everything to you. It's validating. It encourages people to take up space. It encourages people to feel safe. It invites them to continue opening up even more. And isn't that the goal of the spaces that we hold personally and professionally, where someone feels like I can trust them, or they really listen to me? That's one of the greatest compliments that someone can get. And when I first launched the Mental Wealth Method and spent the first beta round with my incredible students, and now we're in the second round and early enrollment is opening for the third round, I realized in between the first and the second round that I wasn't teaching what was the unspoken thing that's happening in a session. I was teaching things like I learned them, which is like going through a manual, learning all of the NLP techniques, getting a chance to really like practice them, embody them, experience them for yourself. But I wasn't teaching the thing that holds people back the most, which is the art of holding space. And like, what do you do when you don't know what to say? What do you do with that uncomfortable part of time that can happen when you like do have a silence? And I wasn't teaching it because I didn't know it needed to be taught. And I wasn't teaching it because I also didn't know how to teach it. I didn't know how to put what I did in a coaching session outside of like teaching a technique. I didn't know how to put the essence of the space that I was holding into something that could be taught. And I'm still learning how to do that. And this is my attempt at it. I also have been doing it with my students in this round by having more integration calls and talking about the space that is held and having them submit videos so that I can review them and talk and celebrate about the strengths that they have as a space holder. And really putting an emphasis on more practice, because that's the thing, is most NLP certifications, not like coaching certifications, a lot of coaching that is like through like the ICF, for example, is like you are being evaluated on your space holding skills. And because I didn't take that avenue, because I took like the NLP avenue into life coaching and not the traditional, like just life coach, capital L, capital C, I was missing some of those elements. And I'm really inspired by the format of like being able to evaluate someone on that, because you can empower people with techniques all day long, but if they don't know how to get on a call and hold that space and know how to transition into a technique, it creates disempowered coaches who have incredible tools but aren't quite sure what to do with them. So that's where the new wave of NLP is going, is combining these things so that we can bring it all together. Now, with active listening, in order to achieve that, we can think of the 3 A's. And this isn't mine. This is from, again, from Google. And I've just seen it around a lot in articles about active listening, but it's really good. So the 3 A's: attitude, attention, and adjustment, which are things we've already been talking about, but you can remember it for yourself this way. So attitude is really about keeping that open mind. Are you trying to dictate the conversation? Are you so focused on what you wanted the session to be about that if it starts to turn direction, you're starting to get nervous and you're thinking about where you're going and now you're not listening anymore, right? So attitude, keeping an open mind, knowing things go where they're going to go. Keeping an open mind to someone being able to go in a different direction. Keeping an open mind to someone having a heavy emotion that they're really living with, and then you're going to be holding space for them. Keeping an open mind to the possibilities that you might not come to a solution in this session, and that's okay. If you don't come to a solution in this section, there's probably something bigger and better brewing for the person that they're going to land on their own solution, but your time with them can still be a powerful seed to help them get there. So number 2, the attention, which is all about like, how do I do it, right? How do I continue to look at the screen? How do I continue to like mirror and match the person in front of me? How do I really be there with them without losing focus? What if I get distracted? What if my phone rings? Right? It can be a lot. And I've had that happen for me too, where it's like, oh my goodness, like something very distracting is happening while I'm teaching, and I will completely lose my train of thought and I'll lose it. And now that's like when I'm teaching and delivering, but if that happens when you're listening with a client, that can be problematic, because if you are doing your best to listen and then you get distracted or you forgot to turn off notifications on your computer and something pops up and it's like really alarming, that could be a moment where you lose what they were saying, and then you miss the important chunk of what you were going to mirror back to them in a question, or to show them that you were listening, right? And a lot of times people just like continue on and pretend like they didn't lose that focus, but you're human. So I also just want to invite you that, like, if that happens, if your phone rings and you forgot to put on airplane mode, all you have to do is apologize and say, I'm sorry about that. Can you say that again? Or, I'm sorry about that. I got really distracted 2 minutes ago. Can you backtrack a little bit and catch me up? Probably won't take 2 minutes, but you know what I mean? A few seconds ago. And that can be really, really honest. And that's okay, because one of the things that can happen when we are building rapport and when we're in dialogue with our clients or the person across from us is mirror back their language. And typically, if someone is telling you how they feel, and let's use the example of like someone's feeling really sad and misunderstood. And instead of us saying, okay, I see that you're saying you feel sad and that you're feeling misunderstood. Like, instead of us just mirroring it back just like that, and we start to say something like, so you're angry and you're upset, right? Like those are completely different emotions, and that could break rapport and could break that sense of like that trust that was being built. And unconsciously, because consciously the person would know you're just trying to be there and you're trying to be supportive, but unconsciously you're starting to end up on different pages. So again, it can go back to that ego of like, we just think we want to be able to give someone everything they need in a coaching session, but they're giving you everything you need to hold the space, and all you need to do is facilitate it. And then number 3, the third A, is adjustment, which really allows you to just adjust to the conversation and where it's going, allow them to follow, or allow them to take the lead and you're following them, and be open, hold that open mind, hold that positive outlook of like, okay, wherever this is going to go, it's going to be great, knowing it's going to be exactly what it needs to be for today's session, and just allowing to go from there. And of course, with this, keeping your eyes on the clock, keeping your notes together so that you understand, like, okay, if things don't quite reach a resolve, or there's a lot of different conversations happening, it's your job to sort of be able to tie them up and talk about them in a future session, or save enough time at the end so you're able to go through them and make sure that you're not just leaving a huge open loop at the end of your time together, but being really open to that adjustment. And one of the tips that I forgot to mention for the attention piece, and in general with all 3 A's, attitude, attention, and adjustment, is being able to actually practice like mind games, or games that are really good for your mind. So this could look like memory games, word games, or just daily meditation of just quietening your mind and really tuning into listening, like internal listening. And when you set time aside to practice that, or set time aside to be able to do a memory game, you're building up that muscle of really just being there and being present, but also to be an active listener. So you can do these little things outside of holding on to that positive attitude to actually build up that muscle. The other thing I love to recommend is watching back your client session. So if you are recording your client sessions, whether video or audio, to listen or watch them back is going to make you learn so much about the type of space that you hold, and the type of body language that you give off, and the type of language that you mirror back. And I know that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable, but it's one of the things that will stick with you and stay with you on a subconscious level, so that you have that information to really support you going forward. You'll be able to pull it up in your future sessions, because typically when we're looking at that, we'll get like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that, or oh yeah, that didn't feel quite right, or yes, I'm going to try that next time. You get an idea for how to slightly change it. And you could watch all the different coaching sessions that are out there on YouTube. They're really fun to watch. It's a great way to learn and practice listening to someone else's client, but there's nothing like watching yourself. So that's my homework for you, is to watch back your coaching sessions. And moving on to more of the unspoken language of holding space, we're going to start to transition into the body language, right? We have our 3 A's, the attitude, attention, and the adjustment. But there's something unconsciously happening when 2 people are together. And this is the unspoken language. This is the nonverbal communication that's happening through body language, through energetics, through just being in a moment where you've decided to be there together and lock into an exchange. That's a lot, right? It takes a lot to lock into an exchange, whether it's a coaching session and you have a designated Zoom time, or you have a phone call with a loved one, or you're meeting up for coffee, right? Something brought you there. And I want to share 2 things with you that are already always happening, but if you know that they are happening and you can tweak it just a little bit to ease into a situation so that you can get into that trust and that knowing and that liking feeling with someone even faster, that they're tools for you in your toolkit. But I'm going to take a sip of tea first because there's a lot of nonstop talking. And let me know in the chat, if you're here live, let me know in the chat what you're thinking so far, or what type of listener you tend to be. Combative, competitive, passive yet attentive, or active listener. Which ones do you find yourself landing on the most? And it might be different personally versus professionally, but if you feel like sharing, please do. As we shift into this next part about that unspoken language, I'm going to start by just inviting you to think about a time where you really resonated with someone. You were just like on the same page. You had just met them and you felt really, really excited to be with them. And you were like, this is weird. I feel like I know you. I feel like I know you from somewhere. And you didn't know them, but you just had that strong feeling like you did. And when this happens, this can be known as you have a strong rapport with this person. And rapport is happening all the time. We're either in rapport or out of rapport with all the people that we're with. But when you have someone that you are directly connected with, and you feel that, and it's almost effortless, it's just immediate, you know how good that feels. Can you remember a time? Now, what if you could use what's happening there unconsciously, bring it up to the conscious level and use it with people that you want to have more of a connection with? And this allows them to feel safer with you. It allows you to build a sense of trust, and it allows clear communication to happen. Now, what this is, it's very, very simple, but it is simply just being a mirror. Just like this live is titled Holding Up a Mirror for the person across from you, it's being a mirror. Meaning, through body language, like if they are going like this, it would be okay for you to go like this. Or if they're going like this, leaning back in their chair and crossing their arms, it might be okay for you to cross your arms or even cross your legs. If they're tilting their head, you might tilt your head either the same way or the opposite way. And it's just these little tiny things that allow you to sync up with someone because they feel like they are looking at something that they recognize because it's what they're doing. They're looking into the mirror. And you might think like, well, how would someone not catch on to that? And trust me, they don't, because it's happening unconsciously. Think of when you are walking with someone that you love and all of a sudden you notice that your steps are synced up, or you're walking left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And it probably wasn't that way at first when you started walking, but eventually you got into that exact rhythm. Another word for this would be entrainment, where you sync up to each other's cycles. whether it be breathing. If you're cuddling at night with your loved one and your breathing is really off, eventually your breathing is going to start to sync up. If you're walking in the park, it's going to start to sync up. If you're with a best friend, you start to laugh at the same time. Your laughs might even start to sound sort of similar. You might start to have some of the same mannerisms that happen. This is all happening naturally already, and it's actually very primal and based on survival. So no one's going to be like, hey, why are you doing that? Obviously, you can do it subtly so that you're easing into building that rapport, but you can do it in a way that is allowing them to feel like they're sitting across from a mirror. This can also happen in the way that you speak. So if there's someone who speaks really, really fast and they love to talk fast, you can speak really fast too, and you can be on that same cadence with them. Or if they're more in their feelings and they like to talk slow and they're just really taking their time explaining things, you might mirror back that same exact pace, right? It could also be done through tonality. And like we've been saying through this entire live stream, it can be done through the words that you use. Mirroring back exact words to someone is the thing. It is the thing that will really start to lock things into place that makes them feel understood and heard with you. Now, a big percentage of rapport comes down to our physiology, meaning what we're doing physically with our body. A smaller percent is the words. But if you can pair up the things that are happening with the body language and the words, you've got a powerful combination for making someone feel really, really trusted, safe, understood, and like they're there. They know that you're going to be a good listener. So like we said before as well, with the active listening, right? You don't need to be silent the whole time. It's okay to have like short affirmations and short sentences or or aha or tell me more about that, and just encouraging that and nodding with them. Or, you know, if there's excitement in the story or frustration in the story, like changing your facial expressions to match theirs, making eye contact. All these things can show them that you're listening on top of the words that you're using and mirroring back to them. So it's very, very simple, nothing complicated. It's literally just taking what you see and mirroring it back to complement the words. So to summarize so far, here we are with the types of listening, being able to decide, are you an active listener, and seeing what you can do to get to that active listening, having the attitude, the attention, the adjustment in your mind of like what to do while you're holding that space. And now the words that you say matched with the body language that you're holding as you mirror and match the person in front of you. You have a really strong foundation for that space that you are holding. But now, I've been hinting at the whole time, we're going to start to round out into releasing that need to be the person that provides the solution, releasing the need to give someone an answer or land on a big aha or a huge shift in your coaching session together. But before I do that, I'm reading the comments. We have someone said, I know my body language could use some help. I tend to get really excited while talking and move around a lot and wonder if more stillness would be more supportive. Well, I think if the person in front of you is also using their hands and they're excited and they're like moving around as well, like you probably have a great rapport. But if they are still, you might be able to try to bring your hands down. Or if you're excited, right? And you want to minimize the movement, you can still embody all that excitement through your tonality and through your facial expressions and through the pacing of your language. You can actually explore and play with that excitement in different forms, but holding the same body language that they have. You know, also, if they are trying to get into a place of being excited, you can lead them there, right? We call this a rapport leader. So if you are on a call with someone and they are feeling really upset when they first log on, and maybe their body language is kind of like bummed out, and then slowly and you kind of like choose to have a bummed out body language too, where you're just kind of like on that level. And then as you realize that, you start to sync up. Like if you take a sip of water, they might take a sip of water at the same time. And then if you, switch to this side, they might switch to that side too. And once you start noticing that they are following your lead, because there will always be a rapport leader. Once that you start to notice that they are following your lead, you might start to sit up a little bit straighter, or you might start to talk with your hands, or you might start to like show some excitement and smile a little bit more. So that excitement that you are sharing, Brina, is beautiful and good. And there's so many times and ways to channel that in. Thank you for sharing. And I'm the same way. Someone will like have to tone it down a bit. And typically when we tone it down, it's something that we can laugh about with people too, right? If we ever notice that we're out of rapport in that sort of sense, like to make a joke out of it can be a way to build more rapport, because then we're able to laugh about it. Okay. So as we shift into this last piece about no one loving a backseat driver and really just like embracing the power of asking questions versus giving a statement, I want you to think about a time that you were driving and someone was giving you directions from the back seat. Did that feel good? Did that feel good to you, to have someone trying to tell you where to go while they couldn't even see the road as clearly as you could see? And I want you to think about this metaphor as a way to think about your clients or the people that you're holding space for. They're in the front seat. They're at the driver's wheel. They know what's going on in their life, and they have the firsthand experience of it all. And even though we'd like to probably think that we are riding shotgun with them, we're in the passenger seat, we're like ride or die, and we're able to support them through and through everything, the truth is that we're a little bit more removed than that. We don't have a shotgun seat. We're not right in the passenger seat. We can't see everything as clearly because we are seeing life through them, and it'd be more appropriate for us to think of ourselves as sitting in the back seat. We're along for the ride, right? But when we start to give advice or give directions, we might start to become a backseat driver. But what can be way more powerful is to let the person who's driving drive. Let the person who has the wheel decide where they're going and be able to navigate their life. Right? And this metaphor of a car, this metaphor of sitting in the back seat is really talking about putting our ego in the back seat as well. Riding on that conversation of really feeling like we need to deliver a solution. We need to give an answer. We need to give them a breakthrough, a big shift, or an aha. But if you're able to think about it in this lens of you're on their support team, right? Like they're in the front seat of the car, they're driving, but they have chosen to pick you up. They have chosen to bring you along for the ride, and they really value who you are and what you do and what you provide for them. And they want you on their team. You're on their team, but you're not necessarily given those directions from the back seat. You're there observing how they're driving. You're there observing how they navigate the world. Do they have a GPS, or are they just trying to guess where they're going? You're watching and learning and articulating and thinking about how they are seeing the world. Because everyone that we ever get to be with is having their completely unique experience of the world. And as a coach, it can be very, very powerful to think about, how are they experiencing this right now versus assuming or really projecting our own expectations of like how they might be navigating something, right? Like if you find yourself leaning towards a solution or like answering your own question in your head instead of like asking a question, that might be a little bit of a sign that you could put the ego further back. Because a lot of times if we're like trying to connect the dots for someone, or we're trying to like think like, okay, this is what it's going to be, it's all coming together, and that one, that takes us out of listening, but two, it really doesn't give us a chance to ask a powerful question. What's more powerful, telling someone what we think is happening for them, or formulating a powerful question that invites them to tell us what is going on? Right? When we're able to ask those questions, we're able to get way more information than we would have had if we just had a statement for them instead. And if you think of what it's like to be in the backseat watching the way that someone navigates, and you might be having your thoughts about like, oh, why did you go this way? Or why did that happen? But if you keep your mouth shut and instead of interjecting and saying like, why did you go that way? And like, but you know that route is 20 minutes faster. And instead hang back and wait to see like, maybe there's a bigger purpose here. Or maybe that there's something developing and that I can't quite see yet. When you do that and you allow that space to be held, you can learn so much about your client. And you can learn so much about yourself by training that part of you that wants to speak up, that wants to offer something right when you hear it, right? Jump in there with that competitive nature, maybe interject. What happens when something plays out? And if something plays out, and we're going to jump out of the car metaphor now. If something plays out and you still don't have enough information, that's another time where people think like, okay, now I got to work with this, like, but I still don't feel like I have enough information. You can still continue asking questions, because you never have to have all of this pressure on yourself to like deliver an answer based on what they're asking. You are essentially helping them find their own breakthroughs when you ask questions. And the best way that I can explain this is to give you an example of a conversation I had with a student really recently, where she was telling me that, you know, a lot of her anxiety about holding space has been going away, because up until now, she really thought that she had to help someone get to a solution or help someone fix something. And it would take a lot out of her after a time where they were together, because she would be still thinking about it. Like, what else can we do? How else can we approach this? Which essentially started to drain a lot of her energy. And as soon as she started to shift and realize that, oh, like, it's not my job to provide a solution. It's not my job to help like have an answer for them. It's my job to help hold that space for them to explore it, right? We think of that container that we're holding for someone to navigate and drive around and wander and explore. That is such a powerful gift to give someone, because there's not too many situations where people get to do that in a completely unbiased container like coaching or therapy. Right? Because even when we're hanging out with friends or family, there's other things that are coming into that container. But when we're just letting someone drive their car and move around and explore all the different things, and we're asking questions and we're prompting further thinking and deeper thinking, a lot of our personal anxiety about how this space is going to go goes away. And we also conserve our energy and really save our own most precious resource, which is having a full cup. And when we shift into that, we got to fix everything, we got to do everything, we can really empty our cup pretty quickly. And then if a session is over and we're still trying to fix things and think about them, that's an energy leak, right? If the time together has ended and we're still continuing it, that energy is still going. And then if you hop in on another call and then all of a sudden you're thinking about more than one person, that's a lot. And people start to realize like, oh, I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm burning out. I don't know if I'm meant for this work. You're absolutely meant for this work. You just haven't found the sweet spot yet of being able to really hold that space, because it is the thing that helps you fill that time. It is the thing that helps you conserve your energy. It is the thing that helps you empower your clients to be giving themselves their own breakthroughs, right? And I know we feel really excited when we're able to lead someone there, or we feel really excited when we're able to connect the dots for someone. But it's so much more exciting to hear someone on the other side of the screen or witness them on the other side of the screen be like, oh my God, I just figured that out. Or, oh my God, I just found the connection there. I realize how that event is showing up in my life now. And being able to witness that, being able to witness the moment where something clicks into place is so much more valuable than us trying to find out what are we going to say to give them that shift. What are we going to do to really lock it into place? How am I going to deliver this for them? Being able to just be with them is the scariest thing, but it's also the most amazing thing. And inside of the mental wealth method, we talk a lot about powerful questions and how to do this. And I won't go into the specifics because it's a lot of content, but the one tip I want to leave you with today, so that you can start to practice this in whatever spaces that you are holding, is steer away from why questions and gravitate towards how questions. For example, if someone were to say, I'm having a really hard time this week, I just feel like it's one thing after another. Well, why is that? Why is that hard? Versus, how is that hard? Can you see the difference there? Can you feel how that holds a completely different energy? Let's look at another example. I'm just not having a good time communicating with my family right now. Like, the communication is falling flat. Well, why is it falling flat? Versus, how is the communication falling flat? How are you having a difficult time communicating? See how much that opens up? You're able to really explore and understand that space in between what they're saying and what the solution is. Because if you get them to start talking about a how, you start to find out the structure of what's going on. Versus why starts to get someone talking about, well, because they're stubborn and they just are always going to be like this. In NLP, we would call that being at effect, where they're not taking responsibility for their role in it, and they're talking about, or not that they're not taking responsibility for their role in it, but they're gravitating towards talking about what everyone else is doing. That can really be a way of shifting someone's reality with one simple question. If we go with the why, we get them to start talking about what's happening around them. But if we go with the how, we get them to turn inward. So if your questions can get someone to turn inward, they're going to run into their own solutions, and they're going to run into their own breakthroughs and aha moments. Because with that example of communication, well, how are you having a hard time with communication? Well, I've actually just been really busy, but I haven't told them that I'm busy, so they don't know that I'm busy, right? Like, right there, they find a piece that maybe is new to them, but it's definitely new to you. And that leads you to another question. Well, what would happen if you did tell them how busy you were? Now you have information about what could happen if you did tell them how busy you were, and then you might even have an action step of something that they can do outside of their session together. How questions will always open up more information so that you can continue asking questions. Or, how does it make you feel when you can't communicate? How would you like to communicate instead? right? So hopefully you can start to see what's happening here. And through the metaphor of the driving and through the metaphor of being able to witness the way someone else is navigating, I tend to tell my students a lot, like, we're the tour guides, which doesn't make sense with the car metaphor too well, but we're the tour guides where we're guiding someone there. So if we can think of it as like, we're in the back seat and we're observing how they're living and they're driving and they're navigating, so that we can ask these powerful questions. We know what questions to ask when we reach the next rest stop and we're just having a conversation about the road trip, right? We know how to open things up, keep things opening up, whereas why questions will continue to shut things down and put people into a defensive place. Okay, I'm going to just look at my notes and see where we're at. I think that's everything that I had outlined for this. The last thing that I didn't get to yet were your specific questions. I had someone ask me, how do I keep everything organized? Like I've got the listening going on, but I had to remember to press record, and I have to make sure the computer's okay. I have to make sure like all the lighting is good. I have to make sure that like my kids are quiet outside, and like, how do I take notes? Like, how do I keep everything organized? And my favorite tip for that is to decide, do you like taking notes by typing, or do you like taking notes by writing with your hands? Because I recommend everyone take notes. It's the only way to like really know what's going on and keeping track of everything. When you have like an hour with someone, right, so much can happen, where if you were to backtrack or summarize a session, it would be a lot to try to pull that all from memory. And no one expects you to do that. As a coach, as a space holder, it's totally okay for you to take notes, and it's totally okay for you to be upfront about it. If you prefer to type, you might just hear me typing a little bit. I like to take notes because it helps me keep on track, and it helps me really see where we're going and what type of change work we might do together and what we might save for a future session, right? Someone is going to feel so taken care of if you say that. And a lot of people like to type instead of like write in their notebook, because it holds the rapport. If you're in a virtual session and you're able to still be up looking at the screen, that really keeps that connection. Whereas if you're writing down, that can break it. But it's up to you, because both will totally work, and it's about what you feel more comfortable with. And the best way to learn how to take notes that make sense for you is to practice and just have more and more times where you're taking notes, so that you can go back and look and decipher how you were taking those notes. Did it make sense? Were you able to reference it later and be like, oh yeah, I do understand what I was saying? Do you have a little system where you write things down and then circle the big ones? Or if you're listening for words that are said a lot, or a big emotion that's coming up, a guilt or a statement like, I just feel like, or I can't do this, and they're telling you a limiting belief, like, do you have a way that you are able to underline that so you know you can get back to that? Practice is the best thing that's going to build that up. But if you really want experience with getting into like testing how your notes work, you can send session summaries, so that when you're looking at your notes and you're feeding back the session summaries in an email or a message to your client, that'll tell you a lot about how you depict it. Or if you don't feel like sending it to them, you can create session summaries for yourself, where you talk about like what was covered in the session, what were the primary emotions that kept coming up, what was the change work that you did together, what ideas do you have for the future, right? And being able to keep a catalog of that in your notes in a way that works for you can help you become an even better active listener, because then you know that you can keep up and you always have your notes to be able to reference, so that you're not simultaneously worried, like, how am I going to remember all of this? Okay, cool. Shahira said, I found that I felt awkward when I had to pull up my scripts, and I usually like it reading from paper in my computer. How can I feel organized in that sense? Absolutely. Great question. So that's why I created for all of my students, I created the virtual version of the script so that you can read it. But if you like reading from paper better, that's okay, right? A lot of the techniques that we do are actually guided meditations where our person is going to have their eyes closed or their gaze softened. So technically they're not even really going to see you that much. But I would say if you have the piece of paper in a way where you're able to like be reading it and looking up, instead like this, not on the screen, but just like right below the screen where you're able to like look and see at the same time is beautiful. And totally different than like if you're reading it like this, right? And you're like looking like that. So just positioning things in a way where you can kind of see both at the same time. But you know what's best for you, and it's totally best for you to go with what you feel most comfortable with, because you want to feel confident, and if you feel awkward at all, go with the thing that makes you feel more confident and comfortable. And one thing that I hope will happen in the near future is like when things open back up and you have in-person sessions, you'd be reading from paper anyway, right? And that can be really nice. You'd be taking notes in person anyway across from someone. And that just is expected. No one expects you to have your scripts memorized. It's impossible with how many we have access to. So I hope that helps, Shahira. Okay, and then another question, which I hope that I've answered this already, but another question that came through was, what if I don't help my client resolve their issue by the end of the session? Any tips for how to wrap it up? Which I thought was a great one, and to just, I think, take elements from this entire live stream and bring it into a specific answer and say, if something doesn't reach a resolve by the end of the session, that's totally okay, right? It's not your job to fix everything in one setting. Sometimes if that is happening, it's probably because there is a lot of complicated layers going on, and you actually, as you started doing the excavating and digging around, you actually found more that you needed to work on together. But what you can do when this happens is, one, keep your eye on the clock and make sure you're able to identify and know how much time you're working with, using the time frame to really understand, like, okay, we have 30 minutes left, like, let's start talking about this, or we have 15 minutes left, I'd like to start wrapping up for today's session so that we can start talking about what you're going to do in between now and the next time we're together. I love to do that one when things feel like really like open, and it essentially allows you to close the loop of your time together and give the power back to them, because we're empowering our clients to feel like they have everything they need to really take care of themselves in between our time together. So it might be co-creating an action plan. It might be saying like, okay, you're going to do this, but then when we come back together next week, we're going to work on this together. And being able to have that chance to like wrap up and use the reference of time can be a really supportive way to bring it together. But then to use language like, I know it doesn't feel like we found a resolve today because we were peeling back so many layers, but I'm really proud of you. I'm really grateful that we were able to do this exploring because we found some pieces to the puzzle, right? Using language like that, or some sort of encouraging words around like, we did work today, right? To acknowledge like, this is work. But it just is an unrealistic expectation for people to show up and think that they're going to solve something in a session. Typically, when we're working with people over a longer period of time, there's this understanding, this like beauty in being able to watch something evolve and work on something consecutively. Now, if you do have a one-off session with someone and you haven't reached a resolve, that changes a little bit, right? Then you want to bring things as much to resolve as possible, or you might want to invite them like, hey, like, I really love what we dug into today, and I'm grateful that we were able to have this time together. It feels to me like we have a lot more that we could do together. If you're interested in learning about a longer term package, I'd love to have that conversation with you if it feels right. But in the meantime, let's talk about what you can do with all the things that we started here today so you can keep that momentum going. So you can use the momentum frame to set them up for success, to talk about how they're going to be using everything that they have already achieved with you, and also use it as an opportunity and an invitation to continue the relationship. If you really were able to get that deep and start to figure some stuff out, they might be like, yeah, I need to do that. And even when we think, this is where I'm going to leave it, this is totally the place to wrap up. Even when we think we didn't give someone a shift or an aha or resolution, I'm going to go like this, resolution, so much more is happening. We're really hard on ourselves because we want to just deliver to the max. And we want to go really, really deep with someone. And that's beautiful. But that's also taking away all the possibilities that could be happening, all the tiny micro connections that could be going on in their brain. And when instead we think about trusting the process and trusting what happened and knowing that everything went exactly as it should, and knowing that things are starting to come together for your client or that person in front of you, across from you, just perfectly because you held up that mirror for them and that this was a step on their journey, that feels so much better than beating yourself up for what didn't happen. Focus on what did happen and focus on all that space that you created for them. In this industry, we literally get to empower people, to encourage them to take up space with us. Think about that. Where else do they get to take up space like they do in a coaching container? And you get to hold that for them. That alone, that act alone is huge, is revolutionary, is a shift, is aha. Because all the change doesn't just happen in your lifetime together. The change happens when they're cooking later on and they're not really even thinking about things and an idea drops in or a solution, or the next day when they have a difficult conversation with someone they love and they realize that it came from the conversation that they had in their coaching session, or 1 week from now where they make that move on the job that they were really excited about and things start to evolve, right? I had a person who, like, over a year ago now, she didn't even know like if she wanted to work with me, but she booked in a discovery call because she just was like, I'm not happy with my job and I don't know what to do about it. And our discovery call just turned into a conversation about like, well, what do you want? Right? Like, you don't like this job, but what kind of job do you want? And she was going after, or she had made the decision that she was going after this like residency, like a really exciting residency where she'd be able to work in the Bahamas as a marine biologist, which I was like seriously jealous because as a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist so bad. But like, she decided not to do coaching because she just like, it wasn't for her. She's like, yeah, I don't think it's what I need right now. But months later, like, I'm talking like, I want to say like 6 to 9 months later, I got a message from her on Instagram saying, I'm leaving for the Bahamas tomorrow, right? Like, it happened. She got the residency. She made it happen. And she referenced back to the discovery call. And like, she didn't need a coaching container to get that change. It was just someone asking her, what do you want, right? No one was asking her that. No one was inviting her to just like unapologetically be like, I want to freaking go to the Bahamas. I want to be a marine biologist. I'm ready to put this degree to action. And isn't that so cool? Like, that's what can happen when we invite people to take up space with us, when we ask the questions that no one else in their life is asking. So put your ego in the back seat, put that little self-talk that wonders, was that good enough? Did I have a good session, in the back seat? Because you planted seeds that might be taking root and sprouting tomorrow, next week, a year from now, 2 years from now, but it is happening. It is happening. And it is so beautiful that you got to play a part in that. Okay, one more story, because this is just such a testament to this. One more story. I I had another client when I was first starting off, and it was my first package that I ever offered. It was a 4-week package. It was called Rewriting Your Origin Story. And this client lived far away from home, and she wanted to essentially move back home someday. But in her mind, it was like far out in the future. But we really built this picture of like, what would it be like to move home? What would it be like to come back there? What would it be like to buy that place that you've always wanted to live in? And essentially, because COVID, she didn't think it was going to happen because of work, and she didn't think she'd be able to work remote. And because COVID happened, all of a sudden her job completely shifted, and she was able to see that she was able to do her job remote, and she was able to have a conversation with her company about moving because she was able to discover that she could live from anywhere. And I remember the day that she sent me a message saying like, oh my God, I'm here, and I can't even believe I'm walking down the same path that was in the hypnosis that you created for me, that we put in my future imagery. Right. And that was like 2 years later, but she thought it was going to be like further out, like a 5-year goal. And it happened in the span of 2 years. And having that clarity around what would it feel like to be there? What paths would you walk on? Like getting that specific about what do you want is the greatest gift that we can give someone. So whatever seeds that you're planting with the people that you hold space with, just be there with them. Actively listen. Remember your attitude, keeping an open mind. Remember your attention, being focused on them. If you have to, set your worries, set your concerns, set your problems aside for the hour that you have with them, knowing that you can pick it back up. Write things down on a Post-it note, knowing you can come back to it later. And then adjustment, being able to move with it, being able to think about things through the back seat where they're driving and you're just being curious about their life. What questions can I ask them that can help us both find more information about the situation? And ditching the why and picking up the how. And then being able to mirror their body language, mirror their language. Laugh with them, be excited with them, cry with them, be sad with them. But hold that space knowing that you are doing enough. It is enough. It is already enough, and you have everything you need. And you will really, really start to believe this the more practice that you get, the more that you're able to do it. And you can practice in your personal relationships just like you can practice with soft clients or real clients, right? Like we can practice with real clients. It's more of just a coaching practice. It's an ongoing practice. It's called a practice for a reason. It's because we're always practicing. So I hope that this has resonated. This is part 1 of the Art of Holding Space mini-series. Next week, Monday, we're going to talk about you and falling in love with yourself for the 1000th time, because as space holders, learning to take care of ourselves, learning to love ourselves, learning to put ourselves first is one of the hardest things. And I titled that 1000th time because it is real. Like, it's not something that you learn and it's over. You're going to continue to learn it over and over again in a lot of different ways. And that's okay. So next week, we're going to dive into you, because you are such an important part of the equation. I'm doing a little butterfly thing because you are. And I just want to thank everybody who is here live and who is catching the replay. If this has resonated with you, please feel free to reach out, to leave a comment below, to let me know how you're thinking about things differently now, having all this information about holding space and holding up that mirror for people in front of you. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to connect again with you soon. Sending you so much love. And if you'd like to learn more about the mental health method, I'll drop a link below so that you can check it out. I'm opening up certification consultations starting this week for early enrollment for the fall semester that you can start to save your seat for now. Thank you for being here. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.